for joining. This is our first Black Culture Month event that we are having. And for anyone who wasn't here last year, we tend to kind of reframe things as more as Black Culture Month versus Black History Month, just because we want to focus on the culture in a way that's like forward looking, celebratory, and not only just looking at like the historical aspects of where we've been and honestly trauma and despair. So we like to be celebratory. We still acknowledge like challenges that we have, but we are more than just our trauma and struggle. So that's why we reframe it more from Black Culture Month. And today, I'm really excited to have this fireside chat with Britt, who not only is our lead for diversity, equity, and inclusion, but she was a former Vaynoire co-lead, so her roots and love runs deep for this community. So wanted to kind of like, first, Britt, if you want to just do your little intro. But I'm really excited for this conversation where everyone will be able to ask questions. It'll be thoughtful. It'll be fun. But want to kick it off there.
Thanks, Steph. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is I don't know what we call this, like third or fourth Black Culture Month that we've kind of rebranded. It's always a great way to kick off like a chaotic year to kind of level set and bring it back to a lot of what started the purpose of how I ended up in this role. But a lot of you, this might be the first time I'm chatting with you, so nice to meet you. I've been at Vayner. I'll give you a little bit of my story, my origin story rather. I've been at Vayner, it'll be over 6 years in January. But to even go further, how I ended up in advertising, like I grew up in Maryland with deep like New York Caribbean roots, but so my life was spent south-north kind of exposure. Went to predominantly white elementary, middle, high school, but went to a real Black college. I went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. My interest was always like creative communication, arts, that sort of thing. Like when I was in college, I thought I wanted to be a music video director. Yeah. But that quickly pivoted when I realized I just wasn't that good like in the director area. My strong suit was more so in support of the creatives. So whether that was from a producer standpoint or a production assistant, project manager, I just kind of got thrown into all those areas. And that brought me to New York. My first internship, I worked for WeTV. I'm dating myself a little bit, but I actually sat in on the pitch for the Kardashians. Wow. They passed. So they're,
ouch.
Yeah, they're probably still kicking themselves for that one. But that's where I got my start in terms of like big cable television. And I've always been attracted to media in some form. Through the years, I've worked in television, film, transitioned into digital because I just saw that's where a lot of the attention and the energy was. Prior to Vayner, I worked for a chaotic startup that focused on like YouTube content. That was where I realized like the power of paid media and wanted to work for a company that just understood what that really meant. I actually came here not realizing that Gary was this huge like figure in the industry. It just looked like an interesting like opportunity. Never worked in advertising. So it was an interesting, I wouldn't say culture shock, but definitely like a new experience to work in an environment where there's a like very public external figure and then a whole business in support of. And when I got here, I started in project management. And I'm grateful for that opportunity because it helped me just interact and connect with so many different people. So whether that was brand teams, client teams, different sectors. Like I'm naturally a nosy person, so being exposed to all facets of the business is what really made the work interesting to me. My attention span sometimes can be a little short, so the chaotic culture of like it always changing was good for me. But while here, the first thing that I noticed was I wasn't the only Black person, which I liked. There may not have been like as many of us as there are now, but there were enough for me to feel a bit of community, and that's what immediately drew me into wanting to help scale and grow that. So my role as DE&I started earlier than I realized because a lot of the work we were doing was in an unofficial capacity. So when like COVID hit, 2020 hit, there was a lot of our co-led employee initiatives to kind of pull a formal DE&I strategy together. We were able to identify our first lead in the subject, and then when the opportunity came to focus on it solely, it was something that I was already doing for free essentially, and it was out of necessity with a team of people. So really honored to continue that work and grateful that the people elevated me into this opportunity. So yeah, that's me. That's how I got here. That's how I started.
Amazing. And before we open up to any questions, but I like to think of things like everything I do is always informed by purpose and the why, not just what you're doing every day. And even the work that I do in strategy, I feel like it's there's a why, because I have a desire to be seen and understood. I like to be able to tell people stories and put together cohorts, so the intersectionality, and you see and feel them more than anything. So I don't know if you want to share a couple nuggets, as we know how you got here and how you transitioned into the role, but what is your why? What drives you and makes you feel purposeful in the work you're doing right now?
Yeah, it's a deep question for me, but the core piece is, not to be cliche, but the people. I think that's what has kept me here for the last 6 years. Where it turns a little deeper is understanding what the people need in order to thrive and survive and grow within the organization. For me, it's the first year of this work was deep discovery, because I could make a quick assumption of what we needed, but we're a company that's driven by data. So it was important that everyone's experience and perspective supported the strategy and the resources that we want to deploy and roll out for the company. So I was very intentional with the team that we have to make sure everybody got an opportunity to express what their experience was like, in addition to letting the work pull me in all different directions, right? So the purpose, and some days are great, some days are a gauntlet, some days are I question my life decisions, but I think overall, not to be dramatic, but I mean, overall, seeing everyone's faces here and, outside of just Vaynoire, but all of our CRGs, all of our communities, and making sure their voice shows up even when they're not in the room is a big piece of it. I think my magic powers or secret sauce that has stayed with me through all of my opportunities has been a translator. So whether that's translating the creative mind to the corporate mind, or now it's translating cultural nuances to a corporation, which is the hardest task of translation that I've had to do, because it's so much more than just numbers on a page. It's people's feelings, it's their experience, it's sensitivity, it's so many inputs holding us accountable. So regardless of what pillar our team is focusing on a different daily basis, I mark my success on how many of you grow within the organization like me. I can't be the only one that's had an opportunity to navigate the waters and the halls of Vayner. So some days it requires a fight, some days it requires a conversation, most days it requires plotting and strategy, but I think that we're, as a company, still very new in our journey, but I'm very optimistic, and I think everyone's very open and receptive. Now 24 is just a year of action for me.
I love that, and I especially love the part about translation, because I think that part is very real, especially when you're thinking of everyone brings with them into a room some things that are baggage, some things that are misconceptions, and we're not always understanding each other because of language and cultural nuance. But before we get into more of my questions, I want to see if anybody else has any questions immediately that they wanted to ask Britt, or open up the floor for a little bit. Don't be shy, y'all.
No, because I'm an open book, so we can take this any direction you want to be honest. All right, everyone's still warming up. Okay, I get it.
Oh, no, you guys be all spicy in the monthly meetings.
Right, like they don't have to be serious questions
Nice.
either. It's fine.
Okay, well, oh, someone had a question? No. Okay, so then I'll keep going because I always have questions for days.
Do it. Let's go.
In that, with like wanting to see people succeed and things that you said you spent the first year doing a lot of research.
Yeah.
Just wondering what you can share in terms of things that common themes you're seeing, and then recommendations and strategies for success for people within Vayner, but also very specifically Black people within Vayner.
Yeah. I think there are themes that everyone should kind of prioritize, and this could be useful to if you're earlier in your career or just trying to navigate the Vayner space. But the first thing is like expand your network. That's the easy one that seems to be not always a priority for folks. I think when we get into a new role, it's heads down. I'm just gonna work really hard, and hopefully that experience elevates me based on the work. In a remote world, we're global now, it's 2,000 people, everything's changing. You do have to campaign yourself a little bit, and what that means is use our CRGs as a tool to help expand beyond just your team and your department. Take advantage of the open door policy and get to know some of our leaders. And the goal behind that is to not only it's not about playing office politics, but it's more about making people aware of the work you're doing, and also learning from them, building these relationships so that when you're not in the room, you're a thought or a mention. Because a lot of times when growth opportunities come up, it's the people that are most visible that are the first in line to be considered. So don't think that just because you're remote or you're in a smaller office that you can't also take this approach, but that's a big piece. The other one that kind of goes unspoken but really comes up often is like mastering the basics. I think what sometimes we oversell in this culture is like you come in as one thing and you can, there's the opportunity to do everything. And that's true, but you really have to master the basics of your role before you can start entertaining the idea of like rotating to another entity or another team, or even like your linear growth within your department, because oftentimes like you may show high potential in one category, but you've completely neglected 3 other parts of your job function. Now, part of the discovery process was me understanding that a lot of the tools and the transparency of what's expected of us wasn't always clear and in our faces. So using the tools that PT has rolled out around our core competency, our career mapping and journey, all those things, they're evolving in terms of how they'll grow and scale with the needs of the company. But I urge you to use them because they're resources that you can start framing what you need to learn and then challenging your managers to really help guide you in that process. Another thing that comes up a lot, when we talk about people that may have performance challenges, and this is a theme that, I see across a lot of different demographics, but one area that comes up often is like people get dinged on their reviews around like proactivity and communication, attention to detail and consistency. And those are themes that have different interpretations depending on the person and the culture and the manager. And I think a lot of times people expect you to kind of just read their mind to know what that is. So really thinking about what does proactivity look like for me in my role and me personally, and what can I provide in those cases, and talk to your managers about these are my examples of proactivity and this is how I'd like to, execute them, and start that dialogue so that they can track and support you in that way. Communication is kind of a vague term at times, so really understanding what that means for you. Is that visibly showing up in a different way? Is that your camera on all the time? Like, is that tonal? Those are some of the like soft unspoken skills that maybe might not be obvious, but you can lean into some of the OGs or the folks that have been here for a couple years to maybe guide you through that. The attention to detail is like one that I sometimes roll my eyes at, because not to be petty, but if your job is about completion and like 90% of what you do is but the 3 times you mess up and like the detail slips, I like to push back on that because I think we want to look at the overall completion of work rather than the like 2 or 3 times that you sent an email misspelled or something along those lines. But sometimes it is real. So keeping that in your mind that that's something that people notice a lot is an area a lens that sometimes I like to proof my work through. And then the last piece that I say to everybody that starts here and continue to remind people is like really own your growth path here, because our company is not always linear in how the growth happens. And what I mean by owning your path is like understand professionally where you want to go and use this company as a stop along the way rather than figuring it out while you're here. Because your rotation here might be 6 months, it might be 6 years, it might be 2 years, but the important thing is like knowing what you need from us and then us understanding the value we can get out of you. And then when those things don't line up anymore for yourself, like you know when to call it. Because I think sometimes people linger longer than they should and they're unhappy, or the opportunities don't align with where they want to go, or as the pyramid starts closing in at the top, there just aren't open positions to fill the growth track. So knowing that Vayners can be a great experience, but understanding that because the company's always changing, like the goalposts might move for you, and it may not be a personal attack, but it may just move because that's where the business is taking us. So owning your path is very important. And like these may feel like heavy themes, but I think if you can, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about them in more detail or in a one-on-one capacity, or even if you want to figure out how to pull in like more resources and whatnot. But that's my hope for all of us, is to really pay attention to those areas, because I think that will just help break some of the barriers of that translation. Because even culturally, like these interpretations can be different to us than maybe our peers that don't look like us. So that's the 4 areas that I try and hold myself accountable for. And I've managed to pivot a few times here, and it's kind of worked. So I challenge the Mo's, the Alex, all the Christines, all that kind of been in the room that have been here a while too, Steph too, to consider those things and use them as a tip for sure.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And in our last meeting, which I unfortunately was not in, but I saw the topics that went in there. I know we discussed this study that Harvard did about workplace, and some of the findings were, it was more specific to Black women, but it was saying that Black women hired onto wider or probably less diverse teams are more likely to be flagged as low performers. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think a lot of what you're saying is very useful, and you are a useful resource to tap into, because there are real challenges, I think, at times, and this is not just a ding specific to Vayner. I think just when you enter the professional workforce in general, and it's not as diverse, with kind of building those connections and also getting the advocacy that you need to elevate. And sometimes you're getting the feedback, but are you being championed? I think those are things that I think about all the time, and especially about building connections. So I personally urge people to set up time with Britt and get to know people, because sometimes the challenges are real,
I actually have a question about that, because Britt, I know we have talked at length about this over the past few years. Yeah. In terms of that Harvard study of Black women usually not getting promoted or raises in the same time frame as their white counterparts. I know we've talked about you going to grad school. Yeah. So while you were at Vayner, you were able to go to grad school on the side and still work at Vayner and kind of juggle the two, which I have always found so fascinating, interesting, incredible. Do you think going to grad school, for whatever reason, whatever career path, helps to kind of, will Black women that go to grad school get promoted or get raises sooner without that degree?
So that's a good question. My MBA journey wasn't necessarily to support my Vayner career. It was just part of my career journey in general. And a big part of why I did it was there was a lot of like instinctual knowledge that I gained in the workplace, but it felt very unstructured. And I understood that to navigate a corporate world, there was a lot of like that. When I go back to the translation piece, just a lot of language and behavior and and insights that I just didn't understand. But I didn't feel confident that I would be able to get it all in time at a job, right? So the MBA track was a little bit of a safety because if I pull the ripcord and decide tomorrow, like I'm gonna be a teacher or I'm gonna work in finance, like at least I know I have a bit more tools in my toolbox to kind of pivot. I think the learning that I would offer to all of you is it doesn't have to be grad school. It could be a certification. It could be a cohort class of some sort, but really take advantage of the opportunity to sharpen your tools outside of work. One, because it offers just a safe space to do that, and you come back immediately with a little bit more confidence because the risk is lower. I think where we don't have the same opportunities is we can't fail at the same rate as maybe our peers can, and that's where the lessons come from. So I took the hit financially and was like, all right, I'm just gonna pay to play. Like I'm gonna do all of my reps outside of work so that when I come back in, I can bring the tools immediately. And that seemed to help me navigate just all of the different brain types and departments that we work in. So, I didn't understand what a balance sheet was, but like they didn't realize on Saturdays I was in finance class, so I think you have to figure out what you want to do overall. Like I know my track is leadership in some capacity, whether I'll be leading DE&I for the rest of my life, like we'll see where the opportunities take me, but I know it's a very strong part of my career journey. So being able to be a business partner is, I think, what helped me navigate so many opportunities here. But to be a good business partner, I had to come with the knowledge. I didn't necessarily feel like I was going to get it in a condensed time frame by hopping around to different companies. Because one, like the way corporations are set up now, like there's no like deep training certification like processes. Like we have curriculums here, but in the 80s and 90s, it was like you were learning for the first 2 years, and that like people can't afford to teach employees in that way. They expect you to come in ready to go, so you have to facilitate that yourself, and whether that's creatively, business strategy, like there are plenty of ways to get that exposure, in the best way you can, whether it's time or money or resources. So if that is, I think that's the best way to help make yourself more visible. To be honest, I think the barriers of pay disparity and promotion are just always going to be a challenge for BIPOC folks overall because the numbers just don't match in terms of balance. So, I'm always saying like find a kid and tell them about advertising early so we can start to recruit more people because the numbers alone, it's like that's sometimes the biggest recruiting challenge. It's like there's only 8% of us in the company. There's only 10%. The industry is kind of the same. So, sorry, I went around in a circle, but I think it's important. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily have to be grad school. Is my short answer. Yeah. So if any of you are exploring or thinking about what that path could look like for you, sure, I'm happy to talk about that too because it was a great experience. But I also bought a small home in the South. With that.
Something else to think about.
Yeah, if you want to put it in dollars and cents.
Right.
I think that's a good point, and I have a follow-up question, but I also want to let Jay ask a question first.
Let's go. Hi, Jay.
Hey, Britt. So you talked a little bit about community in the beginning, and I just wanted to ask, like, what advice would you have specifically to help grow the Black community? I feel like right now the LA office, we're small but mighty, but I feel like there is a lot of area for growth. So what advice would you have?
The small and mighty is real. I think the visibility around the small and mighty helps in terms of growth. I also think you may have to supplement stepping outside of the office and pulling in other organizations and cohorts and events and things, because that sometimes is the best soft recruiting tactic, in my opinion, is bringing in your peers. I think that approach is frowned upon by me when the majority does that, but in this case, I think it's sometimes our best pipeline for unique and interesting talent. And then also, the small but mighty is kind of what we were pre-COVID too. And really showing up for each other is a big piece, because size is important, but for me, like, retention over time is the biggest piece. Like, it's one thing to have, 40 Black people, but if it's a different 40 people every 6 months, like, that to me doesn't necessarily sustain like a stable community. So I think, in my opinion, it's looking to the industry to fill a bit of the numbers feeling that you're having, and then thinking about ways to connect with other groups within the holding company, because, and I owe y'all a visit out to LA, so I'm gonna own that piece too. And maybe I'll find a way to bring some more of us out there too, so it's a little bit of we pull up to the office in that way. But know that we see you, even if it's 5 of y'all, like, when you add the 5 to the 30 on the call, it's immediately a bigger squad. So that would be my recommendation for sure.
The other good thing about that is, like, as you connect with other organizations, like, obviously our job is not recruiting, but the biggest way that people are gonna want to come in is seeing us and seeing the talent we have here and networking, go to the other networking events in LA, join other organizations, or something simply that I did where I met some people and referred them. I put open office hours on LinkedIn, and a bunch of people signed up because they just wanted to, like, get some advice and talk to people, because there are a lot of us looking for jobs out there.
Yeah.
So if you can help somebody get in the door, like, open yourself up, and more people would think maybe Vayner is a place for me that I should apply to.
That's a really good point, and I would, damn, I lost my point already. Employee branding. So I think one thing that I would love the company to get back, and Mo sitting next to me chuckling because I feel like this has always been a false start every year, but this year's the year where I would love to start separating a little bit, no disrespect, Alex, like, Gary from the holding company a bit, like, letting everybody know that there's a community of folks here that, in addition to Gary. So it's like, if there are opportunities where, and keep me honest too, if there's an organization you want to join and you're like, I don't really want to, like, slide in my DMs and see budget-wise if we can afford it. If there's a conference you want to attend on behalf of Vayner, if you want to speak at a college, like, all these things about exercises of visibility are important, but also, like Steph said, it just lets the community know that we're here, and it does work. And I think the consistency is what'll make the impact feel greater. So if anyone has any ideas of where they want to, from an employee branding standpoint, like, either, and I'm not talking about, like, be the cliche token on a brochure or pitch deck, but really advocating for the company in a way that feels authentic.
Can you just give an example of what you think that, I don't know if it's on the spot,
No.
so you can just say no, but do you have an example of that?
Yeah, like, I think when we send groups of CRGs to, like when y'all went to CultureCon, that's the first easy win right there. Steph doing her office hours is another, like, digital approach or version of employee branding, using, like, our social media team. George is here. If you have content ideas that you want to visibly do yourself and put through our channels, like, that's another way that we've seen. I remember hearing of one of our, she's no longer here, but she was on the legal team, and it was the Black History Month content that she saw on social that made her, like, make the final decision that, oh, there's a community there for me, I'm gonna accept this offer. So it's like reminders that I think that hit people that we don't even realize we do. That goes a long way in terms of employee branding. So there's like that organic approach, and then, you know, working with the comms team and Steph and Beth, they have a whole strategy of probably what we would want to do from a more corporate standpoint. But think about what feels good to you, and then I would love to pile onto that. And when we do the events too, like the Juneteenth event is like part Vayner and then part industry, and a lot of leads of people that I end up soft recruiting come from those types of social events. So shout out to Maya for always giving us space at LIC. She's our executive sponsor and in the room. But like those are other examples of where it matters. Sorry, were there more hands that popped up?
Yes, Kendall had a question.
Hey, Britt. So I talked to you a while about this, but I wanted to bring it back because I definitely understand what you mean about personal branding. But what you said before about how a lot of like young Black folk really don't know about this, and me personally, even knowing about this space, let alone knowing that there are people of color in this space under like a year ago, I'm really interested in the exercise of mentorship as well. So I was wondering about what would be the formal way of us setting that up with you or with other people in the organization in order to get that moving, because I would be super interested.
When you talk about, one clarifying question, mentoring like within the Vayner community or mentoring like youth or younger population or college students?
Younger populations,
Okay.
Because I have mentors in this community, which is also, I'm like, hey, while I'm getting mentored, I feel like I could be doing it myself. So like, I feel like that would be awesome to do.
Yeah, so where I'm starting to formalize like a lot of the partner agencies that I think we'll work with in 24 from a like leadership kind of early entry development pipeline, but they are often always excited when anybody from Vayner will talk about their industry. So there's a quick like virtual hit. Actually, I meant to hit you up for one of these. Learning about strategy, creative, marketing. So from a virtual standpoint, there's plenty of opportunities for you all to speak about your careers too. We've started as young as high school. You know, I think the curriculum changes when you get to like middle school, but I don't know if it's of a value just yet to hit elementary, but I would say high school, college for sure, and any like co-op or career training organizations, because we're not necessarily only taking college applicants or college graduates. And then there's the opportunity of like, I actually, it's been on the vision board for a couple cycles now, but I think this is the year that we can take and plan and partner with some of our brands and other organizations to do like an HBCU tour. So whether it's, you know, pick a few Northeast schools, I'd like to at least go to one or two in the career fair capacity. So at this point, it's like, I just need to know the hand raisers of who's down, and we can start to put that together, because I actually think that would just be a fun day in general. And pre-COVID, we were more active in terms of bringing groups in the office and kind of doing that tour roadshow. We haven't revisited that in a while though, so that might be something we can put on the goal list as well. But I'm happy to hear that you are still passionate about doing that, because it's gonna come up and you may regret that you said that. Because I've been hitting you up.
Before I was here, I was a teacher, so yeah, definitely.
Say less. It's happening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's do it.
I'm going for that.
Cool. Did anyone else have a question before I go back into my thoughts?
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts. I always have thoughts. So I wanted to kind of touch back on when we were talking about like education and like learning and upskilling. So one thing that, you know, I'm always like conflicted in is we always try to, you know, strive for excellence and do better, but I feel like there's a toxic side of that expectation on us all the time. And while being prepared is great and trying to work harder than everyone else, sometimes it doesn't always work out. But I was just wondering, like, from that, like finding balance and navigating it from a standpoint of like, maybe we don't always have to be excellent and we need to take care of ourselves and take care of like mental health. What are ways, any thoughts you have on that, but also what are ways that you find out? Like, how are you out here taking care of yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to say with like every life milestone moment for me, I have to reevaluate what I call my like wellness wheel. And what it looked like in my 20s is like very different than my 30s, and I turned 40 this month, so I'm like officially an old lady.
We're not old.
No, my auntie spirit is finally catching up. So I'm excited about that. Yes. No, I'm feeling this era. It has different clarity points to me, but I think genetics. I'll just thanks to my parents because I have trash skincare routine. I'm waiting for it to expire. But so back to the wellness. I think it is important for me. Yeah, no comment. Therapy is real, and I think I'm just gonna like rip the Band-Aid off and go to that point. Speaking from my own personal perspective, I think that how you unpack your emotions and your previous life experiences is so valid for especially like inclusion work, because it's so emotional that if you don't have a range on where your own personal capacity is, like burnout happens. And I think anytime work is attached to creative or culture, it's the same thing. So even being a good artist or creative or creator, whether it's in the form of numbers or writing or copy or strategy, like immediate blocks happen if you're not addressing your own body and your mental state. So I try and be consistent with my mental health care. I try and stay active. So if it's, I don't really love going to the gym, but I do it sometimes. I set a fitness goal or try and play with anybody who's like under the age of 10, and that reminds me that I need to like stay fit to keep up. So I like trick my brain into fitness goals in that way. And then one like practice that I started adapting was really assessing, like rather than trying to optimize my time, it's like managing what takes up the most energy. So if you think about like the Eisenhower matrix, which is like the X and Y chart, figuring out like plotting each side, like personally and professionally, what takes up all the energy and no energy, and where is it high impact and low impact. And then and I'm just a visual, like this is the PM side of me, like when I see things on a page, then I can kind of plan out what I need to do. Journaling is nice too, because I'm one of those, I have a brain type where I'll overthink something as simple as like the quickest route to fill up my water bottle. So it's where can I dump those in my mind? I think they're useful gems, but really just get in the way of actual productive thinking. So try and journal once a day. It's not structured. If you looked at my journal, it would probably look crazy, but that helps. And then one thing that COVID really exposed to me is like the pros and cons of isolation. So I think that where we were able to scale up a remote work world, that's great because I think it opened the doors for other markets, other cities. But for me, the downside of that was the personal connection. So I have to be very intentional about, I've been in the house by myself for like 3 days, and that could be why I'm feeling this type of way. So as intimidating or like all the reasons why from a protest capitalist standpoint of like why you may not want to come back to the office if you're able to come into an office, like even 1 day a week might help in terms of just being around people. There's a benefit to some personal collaboration. So to summarize, I would say like mental health is a priority, physical health, prioritizing like being very mindful of what emotionally takes up a lot of space, and then trying to dial up the fun. Like sometimes I think I can be a little too serious, and that's not also a part of my core. Like I'm very much an unserious child at heart, but I forget that. So I like lately it's okay, I'm gonna schedule childish fun things every couple weeks. And for me, last Sunday I went snowboarding, but it was more of like falling down the mountain, and then we, do some little kids in there. So it was fun, but like you find your own course of action. Like maybe it's a coloring book. I don't know. It doesn't have to be a grand scale, but that's what I do to help balance out the chaos and to really keep an eye on the burnout, because I think us as a group, we burn out hard because the world adds an extra layer of weight to us that a lot of people don't realize or see. So we have to be very mindful of all those inputs. Hey, Abraham.
That's a good answer also.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brittany.
You're welcome.
I was just thinking back, when we had the audit, I'm wondering, is the result from it going to be shared? And if not, how is that going to be, if you like, incorporated into how CRGs are then going to be forward?
Yeah, no, that's a good question and a timely one. Yes, they will be shared. Actually, this month we're planning the town hall, kind of all hearts, where we'll roll out the global strategy, and those audit results inform why we chose the certain pillars and priorities of the strategy. So what you can expect is the team, myself and the team and leadership will walk you through what the 24 priorities will be, and it's a 3-5-year plan. I think what I want everyone to hopefully take away from it is that it's a culture shift and not just a DE&I plan. I mean, in support of that requires a lot of facets, but knowing that what informed the work is the data and the insights that you all provided us. So first, thank you for everyone who participated, and also thank you for your patience. What we learned in this process is it's such a priority. It's why it's been a slow move. I think this has probably been the one project I've been on that has been intentionally vetted and collaborated and reevaluated more so than even the products we sell to our clients. So that part, it was different because we're such a fast moving organization, but because I know it's so intentionally crafted for you all, it kind of balances out the, maybe if I had it my way, we would have started half this stuff last year, but so yes, to short answer, yes, everyone will have visibility into the insights that we gathered, and I think that it will impact a global scale, but it will also have specificity to each of your regions and as CRGs and leads. So that's another reason why Shakenya and Nat, I think you all are on the call too. We've taken a lot of time to really be intentional about those pieces. So thank you all for that, and stay tuned. Hey, Christine.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. I have a question connected to, I guess, the survey, but more so globally.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if there's going to be a training
Education.
globally, or of ERGs and DEIs versus if you do advocate for DEI on your team, they just throw out speak to Brittany versus
Yes, yes. Short answer is yes. A big part of the actual the budget and the resources is going toward education next year. So what we aligned on is a whole curriculum to roll out globally, and leadership has a version as well. So there'll be versions of on-demand or e-learning options, but then also facilitated trainings, either led by myself, Shakenya, or Nat, or facilitator. So ideally, everybody will be expected to roll through the curriculum that we've laid out, similar to the shift training that you see come up in your inbox. That's the same priority that we'll place for it. But education will be an evolving process for us. It won't just happen once. And yeah, let us know. Y'all are in the trenches. What are you seeing in terms of just completely incompetence and where education would be helpful? Ideally, we'll cover things around unconscious bias, DE&I basics, definitely a lot of emphasis and exposure around our CRGs, but an inclusive problem solving, like all those things. So, but if you have specifics, insights that you want to even think about building a special like lunch and learn around, love to work in that regard too. Yeah, microaggressions on the list too. But great question, thank you.
That would be great, because I remember when we took that, remember that training before with the awkward scenarios?
Oh, that was like one of the shift trainings where they had the weird like video reenactments.
Right, yeah, that ain't enough, and it's
I
weird.
kind of enjoy those for the wrong reasons.
But they're hilarious.
It's like an episode of Office. What's up, Calvin?
What up, gang? What's up, Britt?
Hey.
Hey, Steph, thanks. Good to see everybody. One question I had is, when I joined about coming up on 4 years ago, which is crazy.
Wow. Congratulations.
I know, I didn't have to do all that. But one thing, Britt, you put me on a big game, and you were like, you know what, set up 15 minutes with all these people. In 2024, what is the big challenge you might issue for us going into this year? Because I found it really instrumental, those 15 minutes, and kind of really charted my path here. So just kind of curious, what does that look like this year as you think about the opportunity and the runway for everybody who's on the call?
Yeah, what would be the tip of the year, the homework assignment of the year? That's a good question. Because I don't know that it changes from what I told you when you started. I think there's so much value in building relationships. I mean, if you think about our peers, that's how a lot of people get ahead in this business. So that's going to be the reassignment is definitely, if you haven't, and if you even need a list, you can start here. I can point you in the direction. But the other piece would, I think 24 is going to be an interesting year in terms of be mindful of what the world brings into the workplace, right? Because I think we're headed into, maybe a little turbulent from a political standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and that's definitely going to push people in different ways. So keeping that as a personal tip to yourself of what am I going to do to create my own wellness practices so that I can show up and do the work, but still keep in mind what's happening around me, because I think people really underestimate the impact of what their circumstances bring to how they show up at work. So whether that's looking into the tools that we have from an employee resources or benefits standpoint, or just joining an organization to find something of purpose that helps you balance out what you do here. Because often when I talk to new creators, sometimes I think this is just an example. It's when you come out as a creator, you think everything you do here is gonna make you real and fulfill your creative desires and needs. And sometimes that's not the case, because the way brands work, they just always want the corny option. But I think finding what your own personal fulfillment balance is, start exercising that piece outside of work, so that when you come here, you can meet some of your own expectations in terms of fulfillment. So that and continue to get to know folks.
I think something that plays into that, Britt, that I've been trying to make my mantra this year, my number one mission this year is just ask more questions in general. I think when I first joined Vayner, I always played the new girl card, so I was asking those questions the first year. Then year 2, I stopped asking questions, just thinking that I knew everything and that people were coming to me with answers, so I didn't have to ask questions. And now year 3, I'm more so you know what, let me take that step back during my reviews with my manager. Instead of just nodding my head and saying yes to everything, all the feedback that I'm getting, if I need to be more proactive, I'll ask my manager, who have you seen working with different departments and teams is doing a great job of being proactive, and let me connect with them. So I think for me, it's understanding that I don't know everything, kind of taking that step back, working on foundations, and through that, it's asking more questions across the board.
That is a great one, and that I like that one a lot because it goes back to my core of like being a nosy person and just kind of wanting to know everything.
Yeah.
And the questions piece is like how you get there for sure.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Oh, that's some good questions.
Yes. We are getting close to time, so if anybody else has burning questions, please throw them out there now.
I'll make my pitch. I'm on the leadership office hours sheet, so if you have some time, please sign up. I would love to connect with you.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be sending that out.
How do we sign up?
I'm going to be sending out the form for our Black Leadership Office hours. No, that's okay. It's a great little teaser. I'll send that out right after this. You guys will be able to book 15-minute blocks with a bunch of Black leaders at Vayner. So definitely keep an eye out. That's going to be sent out probably at like 2:30 Eastern this afternoon. So stay tuned, guys.
It's a great way to start meeting folks too.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
on that list too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love that. And just in closing, I don't know if you have any last marks of advice or if you have like a favorite Vaynoire memory that you want to share.
Favorite Vaynoire memory. I'm always gonna go with that. 2019 was such a like chapter moment for this company in a lot of ways, but that year was special personally because I hit a lot of, I graduated, had a few milestones, but that was the year that everybody was in the office for like the global holiday party celebration. And we had our party at LIC, and it's always a memory because it just turned into like a real Black function. Like, real quick, yeah, like everything from like Tierra Wax showing up to us having like matching print fabric to
No music in the night.
Yeah, to a dear DJing, like it just really and the fact that it turned that way, it wasn't exclusive. It wasn't excluding anyone. Like I think people still found everyone else still had a great time. Like the culture led in that moment unapologetically, and that was such a fun thing to watch and participate. Like I had like old lady auntie moments where I just kind of like sat back and watched everybody and then I jumped in and like jumped back. So it's moments like that I never thought I would experience on a professional level. Like you get that when you go to homecoming or you go to a party or you go to a family function, but to go to a work holiday party and see that, some of my like friends from B school were like, "That's where you work? That was your work party?" And it's like, yeah, it was my work party. So that was special. And then I think the first time we did that Here Are the Black People conference, like job recruiting fair, that was also 2019. And we were able to speak publicly, like in the panel format, and it was the people leading the conversation, and we put Gary as the moderator, which was cool. That was a moment where I felt like, we had a strong visibility, and was very, proud of that. So those are my two.
The moment where we tried to prep him and he was like,
we had a whole agenda, all these talking points, and he was like, "I'm unpreppable," and that's exactly what happened. all the like rehearsed answers that I had in my mind meant nothing because he just asked me things that I did not prepare for, and it was like a great intro into what it's like being a leader at this company. You just got to be comfortable on your toes, and that's what it's been like ever since.
Well, you're doing great.
Thank you.
No one's told you that. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I personally, my favorite memory is always evolving because it's every time we're able to connect and all be together. So I just urge everybody, anytime there's an event, just show up. Because us connecting, this is what helps balance, gives us peace of mind, makes us feel like, we can navigate this space. So I appreciate you all. We had 33 people on here and people in the room, so
from all across the world too. That's
all across the world. We're global, we're international over here.
Right.
But I appreciate every single person on this call, and Britt, especially to you for your time today. And I look forward to celebrating this month with everyone.